What on earth do the guides say is going on?
They say humanity has invoked. We've chosen this. At a level of the collective soul, humanity as species, we've decided that we have to go forward. If we were to do what we've always done, we would probably annihilate ourselves. Now, the guides have said until we come to a level of consciousness where war isn't an option, I hope it doesn't take great catastrophe for us to change. This is the cleanest teaching I've received through them, and it's so well structured. And sound engineer said, oh my God, this is a manual, a how-to in aligning to change.
Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wondered why there's so much craziness going on in the world today and what it means for you, then do we have the Resurrection Show for you. Today I'll be talking with Paul Selig, my all-time favorite spiritual author and medium, about his latest work from the guides, Resurrection. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about the changes taking place on Earth and how we can all rise to the upper room. So welcome back to the show, Paul. Are you ready to shine?
I'm ready. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being here. A mighty woohoo, quietly done for the baby. And before we dive right into things, it's a really interesting time on planet Earth. What on earth do the guides say is going on right now?
It's great change. It's a wave of change. They've been talking about this for some time. The book that's coming out next, Resurrection, addresses this at length. But they talk about it as a wave that we have to ride. You have to ride the wave to be brought to a new shore. And we're really struggling, I think most of us, to maintain an idea of a status quo, what has been. And they're saying a lot of what has been is in flux, it's in change. And, we're being brought to something higher. So I actually trust that. They say it's the way to navigate these times. And they've been saying this really, I think, for a couple of years. And they've been pretty spot on, I think, in terms of how they've laid things out, at least in my experience of them. Resurrection was dictated last summer, before a small group of people, and some of it was done very publicly in large groups. And I think that they're addressing things we're now seeing and we're now encountering, and I'm going, okay, well, we're on target for this. In the very first book, they said that humanity was going to have to look at all of its creations, a time of reckoning, they called it. And they said, a reckoning is a facing of oneself and all of one's creations, and that everything that's been created in fear needs to be reknown in a higher way, in a higher octave, they say, which is a higher level of vibration. And a lot of what we would be seeing would be sort of the falling apart of things that held their basis in fear. And those things just need to be reknown, re-seen, at what they would say, and what they would say, I think, is in the upper room or a higher level of perception.
Thank you. And we're going to go to the upper room. We're going to go to that higher level of perception, at least discuss it. And I know it's not an intellect. They actually make that very, very clear. But with that said, this is a gear grinder for people, or a gear jammer. And I believe it even jammed your gears as you're speaking this, going, really? What was the challenge in having this teaching come through you? Or what was the challenge that your mind was having a hard time wrapping its mind around? Geez, I'm speaking, it's baby brain right now. Get your mind to grok.
Well, I'm actually taking a break today from doing the audiobook. And I actually haven't read the book, Resurrection. It was dictated through me over the course of maybe 2 months. And it came very, very fast. And they said they were dictating it so quickly so that I wouldn't get caught up in the teachings and have time to really second guess them all or question them all. So the first time that I often really understand what the guides are talking about is when I'm sitting down to do the audiobooks and I have to read them straight through. And then I go, oh, this is what this is about. So my brain is still doing somersaults around some of this because in some ways, I think this is the cleanest teaching I've received through them. And it's so well structured and it's so thoughtful. The sound engineer said, "Oh my God, this is a manual. This is a manual," and I guess it is kind of. It really is in some ways a how-to book in aligning to change from what they call the upper room. So my challenges are always around when they talk about the nature of reality and the elasticity of form and how things can be reseen and reknown and how to look at deep challenge or great pain from a higher perspective. And they're doing this, I think, in a way that I find helpful, at least for me in my understanding. They're not dismissing our experience here. They're not dismissing pain. They do say that if somebody commits a heinous act, they're accountable to the act, but the way that we can then perceive that one can alter our experience and the being of the one seen. A lot of the book talks about perception and perceiving from a higher vantage point or higher level of consciousness. They say, we become the lighthouse or the lamp, and the lighthouse shines on all things. It doesn't decide what gets the light and what doesn't. The lamp, they say, is not illumined for its own benefit. It's illumined for all. So they're teaching us about how to operate at this level. And do I find it challenging? Yes, because I'm living a life that in some ways is extraordinary and in some ways is very, very ordinary. And I have the same challenges when I see current events that other people do. I don't whitewash them. I don't bypass them. But I do find that it's far easier for me now to see beyond a level of surface, to see much of what's going on as part of a required change that they say humanity has invoked. We've chosen this. It's not really being done to us. We've chosen because we really can't go on as we were.
Thank you. Many questions. I want to go to this. And I have a school of mystics where I'm helping to teach people to get outside of this level of seeing the world, to step outside and be able to look down and get that big picture view. So if we step back, are we therefore at a crossroads, and has humanity chosen to go through this to come out on the other side?
That's what I'm told. They've said that sort of at a level of the collective soul, humanity as species, we've decided that we have to go forward. We can't go on as we were, because basically if we were to do what we've always done, we would probably annihilate ourselves, and that we've chosen not to do this. So some of what we're dealing with, I think, is a sacrifice of the known and what we've depended on, which is inclusive of an idea of identity and who we are as the egoic structure or personality self being primary. Because the small self, they call it the small self, or the personality structure, was trained in separation, grew up in separation, and they're teaching us a different way of operating, which is far more inclusive. So I see this all as quite hopeful. There was a time in the teachings when I questioned. They would say, humanity has a choice. And they've been saying for the last year or two, humanity is chosen. It will be so. So I'm trusting that.
Thank you. So let's go to the lighthouse for a second. How-to manual. How are the guides saying that when I said I wouldn't go into specifics of current events, but we know there's been some real heaviness going on stateside. There's heaviness going on in the world right now. When you see that, how do you get back to that lighthouse perspective? Or I like to think of it as a sun that shined its light on everything. How do we get back to that perspective when we're in a holy smokes moment?
Well, the first thing I want to say is there's actually a lecture online that was delivered the day after the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando. I was traveling that weekend. I woke up to the news, and the next morning they lectured on it. It's called How to Deal with an Atrocity. And they talk about shifting perspective.
Where can people find that?
That's up on YouTube. It's actually one of the few times that I read the transcript of the lecture, because it felt important, and I was still new enough in terms of my work being known by people, that, people are getting turned off by the way that I deliver, which is I whisper and repeat, whisper and repeat. Almost all the lectures that are up online have me doing that. But that one I actually read to make it accessible. So what I understand about this is that there is an aspect of each of us who knows who it is at a higher level. Like the guides call it the monad or the true self, the Christ within. There's a name for it, they say, in every religion. And that aspect of us already is present in what they call the upper room, which is a level of consciousness. They say it's the octave above the common field that we've been brought up in and we're all in agreement to. So they teach us how to get to that level of vibration. And they say the whole thing about the upper room is fear doesn't exist at that level of tone. If you want to have your fear, you can go back downstairs and have those experiences and learn through it. But they've always said that the action of fear is to claim more fear, and every choice we make in fear gets us more of the same. And I believe that to be so. So when you go to the upper room, what you're doing is you're working with the embodiment of what they call the monad or the true self. And that aspect of self that knows who it is also knows who everybody else is, which they would say is of God. So from that level of perspective, you can't be exclusive. You can't put people outside the light. The guides have said repeatedly, what you damn and who you damn damns you back. And all that is a teaching of co-resonance. Because what they say, what you put in darkness, who you put in darkness calls you to that darkness. So when you become the lighthouse or the lamp, or you are this in incarnation, when it becomes your expression, the light is your expression, which is the guides say, how we serve. We're actually there for the benefit of all. And that must be inclusive of the things that we see that feel so painful. And the idea of lifting these things, I don't think is about fixing them. I think it's about re-seeing them and re-knowing them. The level of consciousness that I think can cause somebody to do great harm is not the level of consciousness that's going to be healed from. It has to be at a higher level.
That's the challenge that I have with history. And it's a challenge I can remember going back into high school and raising my hand and going, I don't get it. I don't get when one people kills to defend themselves against another people, and then another people kills, and we're reading about all of this killing, and they're saying, well, that's to prevent it from happening again. I'm going, no, that is reinforcing an old way of being.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the guides have said until we come to a level of consciousness where war isn't an option, we'll have war. But because we've been so entrained in that, we're going to keep creating it because it's what we've known and consequently what we expect. And we always call to us what we expect. I hear that's changing out of necessity.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the guides say, it's funny, it's in the new book, but they said we are, and this was dictated last year, and they said you're going to be seeing war at a scale humanity has not seen. And it's a result of this that humanity is going to say, this cannot be so. We cannot do this. I hope it doesn't take great catastrophe for us to change, but we have many catastrophes in our country and in our culture that don't seem to herald much by way of a change of consciousness. But I do get that it's happening now. So that's what I think will do it. But I also think what's happening is people are waking up to their own nature at the cost of systems that perhaps are failing them and having to ask other questions. When I was in high school, you were supposed to go to college, you were supposed to get a job, there were the things that you were supposed to do. And a lot of those shoulds aren't operating anymore. People are finding out that the rules that we were raised with are faulty or no longer applicable or don't promise what they used to, and they're choosing differently. And I think that there's value there. There's also chaos, because when systems break down, there's chaos.
How do we balance both of those? Being told there are there's the potential for a lot more war, for a lot more chaos, for a lot more disorder, and it's time to go to a place of love?
I don't know. I'm not a spiritual teacher. I'm really not. And I'm not a guru, and I have no desire to be either of those things. I do take dictation, and I take it pretty well, which is the craft I have when I channel. I can ask them and see if I'll get anything this morning, and we'll see, because I don't have the answer we'd like to answer. They're saying we would like to answer this, the aspect of you who knows she is, the aspect of you who knows who she is, what he is, how she serves. How she serves is always enacted through an exchange of vibration, When you know the one before you as of God, when you know the one before you as of God, you will not deny the light of them. You will not deny the light in something. When you don't deny the light in something, you can reclaim it. We call the upper room. You can reclaim it in what we call the upper room. The upper room is strata of vibration. The upper room is a strata of vibration, tonality, and exchange. Where what you call to you from this precipice of truth, will claim that what you see in truth, will claim what you see in truth, or align it to its innate self, or align it to its innate self, which must be of God, In fact, there is nothing outside of it. In fact, there is nothing outside of God except that which you put there. And what you put in darkness has been said, and what you put in darkness, as had been said, that darkness calls you to that darkness. When humanity chooses the higher, they're actually invoking a great new potential. They are actually invoking a great new potential. And the higher potential you see, can be realized, can and will be realized through the co-resonant field, that invokes it. A decision must be made at a soul level. To move beyond what has been held as final, I may only know myself in fear. We will always be at war. The new potential rests outside of the unknown. The new potential rests outside of what humanity has known. It is available, though. It's another strata of consciousness. It's another strata of consciousness, the octave above the unknown, the octave above the one you have known. To lift to the upper room. To lift to the upper room is to claim your true inheritance, To claim your true inheritance is to share with all you see, is to share it with all you see. The source of all things come as each of you. The source of all things come as each of you that would reclaim all things as of itself, period. And they're saying period.
Thank you, Paul. I have a question I'm curious if the guides can answer, which is, my belief is that we are lurching forward toward this beautiful tipping point at which the dominoes fall and humanity rises to that higher level. However, on the surface, it really appears to be a time of backsliding.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the question for the guides would be, how can we tell that we are actually moving forward?
Understand who you are. The aspect of yourself that doesn't agree to fear. The aspect of self that doesn't agree to fear can see the truth of the situation, If you look outside you for evidence, you may find it in personal life. You may find it in your personal life, but the collective is in change. When you start to clean a room, it looks far messy before it's done. What is surfacing now? What is surfacing now is that which smelled in darkness, is that which has been held in darkness. It must be seen to be changed. Re-seen to be known. You cannot claim what you deny, and the violence you see, the levels of control you see, have simply been there, but less present. You've been less aware of them, and you've been less aware of them. You have been at war since you began to throw rocks. When the rocks are so large. They could annihilate a people. You take notice finally. That this will come to no good end. Finally, humanity says yes. Finally, humanity says, yes, what you are seeing now are humanity's creations. What you are seeing now are humanity's creations, humanity's choices born in fear, humanity's choices born in fear that seek to reconcile, that seek to reconcile. Now, when something seeks to reconcile, it may make a fuss, it may make a fuss, it may stand up. It may stand up and be screaming in order to be known and re-seen, in order to be known and re-seen. The changes that you are in now will not stop for some time, will not stop for some time. We would say generations. We would say generations before the peace that we speak to will be known. Before we say generations, before the peace that we speak to will be known. You must understand the folly of the past. You must understand the folly of the past, the refusal to love your brother, the refusal to love your brother, the denial of the divine in all things, the denial of the divine in all things, in order to realize who you are, in order to realize who you are beyond those old creations, period, and they're saying period.
Thank you, and thank you to the guides. And that actually, between you and me, Paul, that's kind of intimidating. I've got a baby girl behind me on the couch behind me, and I'm going, it's not even going to be in her generation. The little mind, the small self, wants this positively, and my mantra is kind, gentle, easy, good, to take place now rather than to be generational.
What I'm hearing is, at the level of the individual, it is taking place now and can be seen and can be seen. And as most of you do this, and as most of you do this, you give permission to others. The amplification of the light. The amplification of the light is what is stirring up the darkness, Finally, the light will still arrive. Finally, the light will survive, will claim all things, will claim all things to itself. There is no need to despair here. There is no need to despair here. You are party to these changes. What you are seeing now are your own creations. What you are seeing now are your own creations. Humanity is complicit. Humanity is complicit to everything it sees, You created it. This doesn't mean you created it, but because it's in your field, you participated in its creation. But because it's in your field, you've participated in its creation through your consciousness and agreement to its being and agreement to its being. When you stop agreeing to something, it will no longer be there. It will no longer be there. This is true at the level of the collective. This is true at the level of the collective, and that is what you come to next. And that is what you come to next, period. And they're saying period.
Thank you, Paul. Forgive me for going through the heaviness, but we're working our way to the other side. We've had 3 miscarriages, lost one of our baby twins in utero. We have the most amazing baby girl behind us, and that is a focus on the light specifically. What would the guide say about, and I'm going to try to keep it in terms of generalities here, kids, because we would say, did a child really choose this? Now, on the other hand, baby Hannah chose to come around until she finally made it here.
I don't know about this one. It's really funny. I don't read other channels, but I do see on my social media feed occasionally these snippets from Seth. Jane Roberts was channeling Seth in the 70s, and I really respect that work, although I read one of those books when I was back in grad school, but I'm not somebody who reads channel literature. I try to keep it clean. And, that was an interesting teaching because he seemed to be saying that children at a soul level are also in choice. This is all happening at a soul level. So when I hear generations, I actually think I heard 4 generations or something. And I think that may be what's in the book. And I was surprised when they said that. And that was in a very large, it was like 400 people in a live stream for that, when I'm thinking, oh, crap, 4 generations. And of course, everybody was like, oh, crap. But, that's not that long, truthfully. It's really not that long. And, your daughter may well be here for that to happen. I don't think of these things necessarily in terms of an event. I've lived through a lot of them. I had my kind of awakening in if you want to call it that, at the Harmonic Convergence in 1987 up on my roof the night before, asking to be woken up because I believed maybe something could happen. And I had an experience that did alter me in some way, or at least how I thought of myself and God and the world. And now you hear about this and that and this and that, and maybe it's all so. But I think we're all in this together in this soup. And this soup that we've created is what we know of as reality. You know, the upper room isn't an escape from this world. It's a way of operating in this world in a higher consciousness to support the awakening or the realization or knowing of others, you know, and that's simply by the act of being. There's no proselytizing in this stuff at all. It's about being the light. You be the light knows what it is. It's not trying to be the light. It's not trying to fix everybody and getting them to agree or to behave or to love one another. It's being that love and letting that be the testament to it. You know, it comes down to this idea. I mean, I know, you know, I was raised an atheist, you know, when we come to this stuff, you know, I'm just finding out my family history. My father died when I was 5 and my mother rarely spoke about it. My whole father's family were Holocaust survivors. I really didn't know. So we went through that. My grandfather was in Dachau. My father was in the Kindertransport. It's like, hey, you know, there's all this stuff. You know, and so I still believe at a certain level that we have great opportunity to know one another beyond our idea of history, which we're so entrenched in. And I mean by that is a history of separation. You know, the guide said we believed ourselves to be so separate from one another that we made ourselves separate from source. We chose separation and we chose to learn through it, and we've learned what we can through it. And, you know, there are other ways to learn besides fear and violence.
Have the guides shared why humanity chose that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's in a bunch of the teachings in different ways. But I mean, it was really, I get that it was kind of a claim of separations. We just stopped trusting source. We thought there wouldn't be enough. So if I don't hoard the fruit from the tree, somebody else is going to get it. And then you have a wall built and you have separation. You know, that's how I understood it, this kind of tribalism that we invoked, where we forgot what our source was. And the guides don't talk about God as some benevolent being or some old man on a cloud or some woman on a cloud. They don't talk that way at all, but they do say there is one note sung in the entire universe, one tone, one sound that is in manifestation as all things. And that one note sung is God, or sometimes they'll call it the word, the first idea, the first principle. And that when we understand that that's the case and that things can be restored to their true nature, which is of spirit, of God, that's when things really, really change. You know, I'm living a life that is as different as I could have imagined from what I used to live. And this is not a life I would have even known to choose, I don't think. And I'm very grateful for that. But it came through my letting go of all of my expectations of how things were supposed to be.
We've talked for many years. You had already been well down this path, but I can still see you in an apartment. I think there might have been a bookshelf behind you. It's kind of dark. I mean, this room is kind of dark today for some unusual reason. But with that said, there was like continuous fighting. No matter where you were, there was continuous fighting of tenants or yelling and screaming going on. And you're going, I've had enough of this. It has to change. I don't know what it's going to look like. And you are in a place of, there was a peaceful resignation that when the time is right, it will change. And a chaotic understanding that I have no idea what's going to come of it. And look at you now. Maui, beauty all around you, the birds chirping. But you had nothing consciously, my guess is, to do with getting yourself there.
I agreed to it. I agreed. But, for me, you know the story. I mean, I was in Costa Rica when New York City shut down for COVID. I was supposed to be gone from New York for a week. And then I couldn't go back because New York was on lockdown. And I had a friend who said, come here. There's a little tiny house you can stay in. And I did. And then I never left, really. I'm going to go back to New York for the first time this summer to work. But I haven't been back to see my family since, and I'm looking forward to that. But I understand that what I was offered was something that I would have been terrified to say yes to because it was too different from what I had known. Now I have a cow that keeps me up sometimes on the next property, and only once in a while. And I actually really appreciate the cow because it's company. I'm in the rainforest, so that's what you get.
I know of these cows that you speak. So that brings us to this concept of resurrection. What do the guides mean, and what's going on for us?
They're talking about the resurrection of humanity. Now, the monad, which is the divine spark or the light within, the God within, they would call it, which they do say is different than the soul. Soul is the aspect of us, they say, that progresses and learns, but the monad is that inner light that is instilled in us at the time of creation that seeks to realize itself. So the realization of the monad or the light or the Christ himself, whatever you really want to call it, I think has been their teaching from the very beginning, the eternal self, they call it. And the idea of incarnating as this or embodying as this is really the basis of their teaching. And the first series of books was really all in preparation of where they're going now. But where they're going now is really instructions in how to operate as this from this higher level of amplitude, which is surprising to me. But they're teaching us as if we've not only done it or at least we understand how to do it. And I guess they're giving themselves credit as teachers. But what I found so interesting in reading this book is they're starting as if the readers have been prepared and they just go for it. There's sort of no repetition. It's an adult book, but I find it very easy to follow. But to be in a resurrected state is to incarnate as the true self, to be the light for the world. This isn't self-help, it's something different.
They talk about in the book, there's only one schoolhouse. We're going to give it to you. No matter what the level is, we're going to give it to you and you'll come along for the ride. But they talk about all of us, and the small self fights this left and right, all of us being of God. That's a very hard concept for many of us to grok.
It is. It's hard for me too, but I believe it to be true. I believe it to be fundamentally true. You see, the guides say, you can't make anything holy. It already is, but you can deny the light in anything. And one who believes himself or her to be separate from source will create all the evidence in the world for that. And what we see, I think, is as hatred or greed or violence or all these things, they say are expressions of the denial of the divine. So one who has, but there's actually a teaching in the new book. I don't remember how to say it because I just read it the other day, but they talked about someone who, if somebody is raised in a dark room and has never known the light is a terrifying proposition. And all of their choices will be made in that way and seek to reinforce what they have known. And we have a lot of this, and we see a lot of this, but I don't know that the antidote to that is violence or putting people out or whatever we would do. I think the opportunity is to re-know them as worthy of love. Finally, that's the opportunity.
What's fascinating is in shamanic terms, let's say that you're doing a clearing and that there is an energy that's latched onto you. Call it whatever you want. You have to let the energy know that it's okay and safe to go to the light because all they know is darkness. And so to them, safety is found within the darkness.
It's the same principle. But, the guides say what's true is always true. I don't really think it matters what context or or system you're working with.
If somebody came to, and I can remember the only real spiritual talk I ever went to was you in the city. That's it, Paul. If somebody was there at an event of yours and they're creating all the evidence in the world that they are not of God, what would you tell them?
I wouldn't tell them anything. The guides might talk to them. I know what that feels like. This has not been a swan boat ride for me. I've really had to and probably still will continue to confront a lot of stuff on this journey. I envy people who say, "Oh, it's just wonderful. It's spiritual. It's all pink rose colored glasses." That's not been my experience at all. So what would I say? Nothing. I'll go to the guides. What would they say to somebody who believed themselves to be only darkness? That they may learn through that if they wish to, that they will continue to accrue evidence for what they want, and that they will get what they expect. But if in fact they are willing to be reseen or reknown, they can and will be. They can and will be. Grace is present. Grace is present when the allowance for grace is present. When the allowance for grace is present, when we witness our students. When we witness our students, we see them beyond their creations. We see them beyond their creations. We don't see them as they think they are. We don't see them as they think they are. We see them as they know them to be. We see them as we know them to be, as we know them to be. To know another is to know them. To know another is to realize them, to know them as God. To know them as if God is to realize them in truth, is to realize them in truth. When one is realized in truth, what one has claimed as an encasement, what one has claimed as an encasement in denial of the divine, in denial of the divine, may fall away, sometimes very quickly, sometimes in time, as the system can hold the revelation light, as the system can hold revelation to light. You don't bring somebody into the light too quickly. You don't bring somebody into the light too quickly. They will seek to run from it. That they will seek to run from it. Their experience of the light must be tamed, accepted, and agreed to by the energy system that they have known themselves through, first period. The same period.
Thank you. From here, two concepts I want to see if we can cover. The first one is, you had mentioned earlier, instructions how to operate at this higher amplitude. How do we begin to do that?
I don't know if I said that right. And, I'm not finished dictating, doing the recording for the book yet. So there's still like another 50 pages. I got to figure out what they were talking about. But let me get it from them. It's not so much an instruction manual as an operating system that you can agree to, when we tell you who and what you are, when we tell you who and what you are and how you may operate at this level, and how you may operate at this level, the choices that you incur, what is not your responsibility, and what is not your responsibility, and what is. You have a way of serving. With effortlessness. You think this is very hard. But once the foundation in the upper room is laid, the being up there is actually fairly simple to understand who you are, as the light, and the light has its own purview, and that the light has its own purview, its own choice to shine. It will do so without your consent. It will do so without your consent. And this is the consent of the small self. And this is the consent of the small self, the arbiter of good and evil, who should be loved and who should not, who should be loved and who should not. That aspect of self is assumed in the upper room. That aspect of self is assumed in the upper room, is reclaimed in the upper room, and is not the one deciding where it will shine, and is not the one deciding where it will shine, period, in the same period.
Thank you, Paul. So how do we get to the upper room, and what is God is?
The books that the guides have dictated all seem to be in sequence preparation for this. But there are a series of attunements in the book that can be invoked. You don't have to go through all the books to invoke them, but I think each of the attunements carries with it a shift in the energetic field. And when you attune, you're always aligning to the energy of the attunement. It's kind of like plugging in coordinates in a jukebox. The song will play when you say these words. So the words the guides say are encoded with vibration, and when you invoke the language, you claim the alignment. So there's a series of them, but I'll begin with, I know who I am in truth. I know what I am in truth. I know how I serve in truth. And the guides say, what this means is the aspect of self who knows who it is the true self or the monad. It's not the personality structure trying to deify itself at all. I know what I am in truth is the manifestation of the divine, God as all things in form. I know how I serve in truth, which is how I express, how one expresses as this energy or as this light. The claim that follows that is, I am free, I am free, I am free. And what that claim, they say, does is it offers us liberation from the common field, which is what we believe to be the ceiling that we can actually move beyond. And that's the ceiling that, would support us in knowing everything through fear and separation. So I am free, I am free, I am free. And then the very simple claim, I am in the upper room. The claim I am in the upper room, they say, is invoked by the divine self or the monad because it knows who it is, what it is, how it serves. It is free, and it is in the upper room. So you're claiming that into being, or you're claiming that level of alignment. That would be a better way of saying it. And then the claim that follows that is, I have come, I have come, I have come, which is the divine self or the monad expressing itself at this level. And they say that's the claim where you're saying, okay, you can have all of it. Let the divine self take all the aspects of me that have been shunning the light or hiding from the light or in fear of the light. The claim God is, God is, God is, they say, is the claim of truth, that the source of all things is present. And it's the antithesis or the antidote for the denial of the divine. God is, God is, God is. It's a claim of fact. You're not pretending God is where you can't see it. You're knowing that God must be, because it must be always or ever or nowhere at all. That's how I understand it.
When we had a choice to make, thank you, we had a choice to make to let go of one of our twins in order for other one, baby Hana, to come through. We had to let go of baby Miraku. That God is, whether literally through your writing or just as in my mind, was an anchor for me, which is, if everything is the divine, then nothing is not. Therefore, whatever is taking place right now is of the divine, and to let it go and to re-see it, to see it anew from that higher perspective.
That's how I understand it. When I first had an experience of this, I don't know if I've told you this, maybe, I was maybe 29 or something. I just come through a terrible, terrible, terrible period of great pain. And when it lifted, and it really did lift, I had this experience of knowing that I was right where I was supposed to be, but also knowing that everybody else was as well, regardless of what it looked like. I mean, I never had an experience like it in my life. It lasted a few days, and I thought when it happened, like, this is where I want to live all the time. And I understand it now that I got a preview of a kind of consciousness that exists. But it's what you're talking about, because you really can't exclude anything from the dance. That doesn't mean that we don't make choices that we're accountable to, and that people don't do things that are harmful that they're accountable to, and that as a culture, as a society, we have to find ways to address in positive change. But I agree with you about what you're saying. I'm an old 12-stepper, and there's a line in the 12-step literature. When I first read it, it just blew my mind. I was 25, and it said, God is everything or God is nothing. What's our choice to be? And I was like, huh? You don't get to cherry pick. And that's always been the most challenging thing.
It's the most challenging thing, but it's also perhaps the very thing that you can lean back on that changes everything. Because it's interesting. I go back to the concept, forgive me, it's childbirth time, but that's actually what we're talking about here is birthing humanity anew. It is much easier to completely surrender control into labor and childbirth and go, I have no idea how this is going to go. I give this to the universe, to God, to source, whatever we want to call it. Much easier to do that than on a day-to-day basis of where am I going to live, or do I choose A or B, where the small self tries to grab onto a completely false sense of control.
I agree with you.
Switching gears from there real briefly. What's the one thing the guides would want us to start doing right now?
I'll ask, trust. I hear trust the process, and trust the process that you're in. Trust that the change that may be for you will be beneficial, and you have a say in it, and that you do have a say in it, how you attend to your brothers and sisters, how you attend to your brothers and sisters, how you attend to policy, how you attend to policy, how you attend to politics, how you attend to politics is all up to you, really. It's all up to you, really. These are human systems. These are humanity's systems. You've created them. You attend to them. You've created them. You attend to them, or let them go, or let them go. It's really your call. It's really your call to trust the process you're in. To trust the process that you're in means you acknowledge you're in great change, means acknowledging that you're undergoing great change. You'll not see the outcome for some time, and that you will not see the outcome for some time, period. And they're saying period.
Thank you. It brings up such a key point that comes about toward the end of the book, and I know you haven't gotten back there again, but you will recall this word, unity.
Well, I mean, I don't read other people's stuff, and I don't read non-duality stuff, and I've never read physics, although I think if I would never stop, because I've been told the guides are teaching this in their own odd language about how matter is transformed and things like that. But the idea of understanding the self as an individual creation, but of the whole, is unity consciousness. And to understand the self as a creation of source and of source, but still operating with will, perhaps a unified will, or a will that's in alignment to the higher, is an awareness of the same thing. I mean, they've talked about moving away from the idea of being singular to the idea of being plural, or of the whole. And finally, I suppose this is the same as all those teachings of, what you do to your brother, you do to yourself, or what you do to your sister, all that stuff. I think it's all the same thing. Finally, we're all out picturings of the same source having individual experience and learning here. I don't know. I think it's great opportunity.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. How do we heal? I think you have an actual word for this. Reconciliation.
Well, I'm going to go to them. To reconcile is to re-know something. To reconcile is to re-know something as of its source, as of its source. It's really very simple. It's really very simple. That which has been splintered, is still of the wood it came from, is still of the wood it came from. To know the source of the wood, to know the source of the wood is to know the source of the, is to know the source of the splinter. When they are unified in conscious, when they are unified in consciousness, it is actually made whole. It is actually made whole, or in agreement to its source, or in agreement to its source. And that is what you will do. And that is what you will do. All of you will do. All of you will do as you are reconciled or resurrected, as you are reconciled or resurrected to your true nature, to your true nature.
I'm trying to step back and put myself in the shoes of really everyone right now. And the small self is screaming, I can't take this anymore. Is there something we can do as a collective and an individual to accelerate through this?
I hear a line to peace, Align to the energy of peace. Sit in a chair and align to peace. Sit in a chair and align to peace. Claim peace and align to it. Claim peace and align to it. As if it's a radio station that you are playing. Claim peace, be peace, be peace, and be in peace, and be in peace as you act in this world. As you act in this world, don't be deceived. Don't be deceived. Fear would like you to dance. Fear would like you to dance to its music, to its music. If you do that, you will wear yourself out. If you do that, you will wear yourself out. To understand the opportunity here, to understand the opportunity here is to re-know the self is worthy of peace, is to re-know the self is worthy of peace and choose from it, period.
Thank you. Weird question. Are the guides on their own evolutionary journey, and have they been through this themselves?
Some yes, some no, some no. The idea of who we are has been changed by some of you, by some of you. The truth of who we are. The truth of who we are is as a manifestation of the Christ, or that level of consciousness, or that level of consciousness. Somewhere came. Some came as this. Some have claimed it. Some have claimed that through alignment, it really matters not. It really matters not. As we know who we are, we know who you are as well. We know who you are as well, period.
Thank you. And what do the guides want for us?
Love. That's what I hear, love.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Just a few more questions, Paul. This has been truly beautiful. Do you recall what the idea of a template is?
Kinda. The template is kind of like the blueprint. The blueprint for reality. The blueprint for reality that we've been operating in is informed by history. Guides say that the small self knows itself entirely through history. What other people have chosen and claimed. That's how we understand choice. They say everything you see around you was named by somebody who came before you. And all of these things are sort of imprinted in vibrational accord with the meaning that they have been given. So this is good, this is bad, this is what you should aspire to, this is what you should never want. All of that stuff is through this old sort of common field. They call it the common field. The higher template, new potential, is the new potential and its structure that seeks realization here, It is already present, must be remoored. It is already present, and it must be remoored in physical reality, so become yourself to it, so that you may comprehend yourself through it. That is the world made new. That is the world made new, period. And they're saying period.
How do we then strip away, thank you, how do we then strip away, this is a chair, this is a bench, this is good, this is bad?
This is the process. They're saying this is the process that you're engaging in. You're not discounting that a chair has been a chair. You are not discounting that a chair has been a chair. You know what your name is and where you went to school. You know what your name is and where you went to school. You say this was a good thing or a bad thing for me. You say this was a good thing or a bad thing for me. But the restructuring of reality renders things new. Your idea of what a chair should be may be changed. Your idea of what a chair should be may be changed. Your idea of what was once good may be altered vastly. Your idea of what was once good may be altered vastly. The material realm will indeed reflect this. The material realm will indeed reflect this, because the material realm is actually subjective thought, is actually subjective to thought. And when thought is operating from the upper room, it claims things of like vibrational accord. It claims things of like vibrational accord. You're not denying what history was. You are not denying what history was. You are just not bound to the precepts of it. You are just not bound to the precepts of it as the basis for your choices and creations,
Thank you. A personal question for Paul. What gives you the most hope at this time?
How much good has come in the face of great pain and in the face of challenge? How much good can be claimed? The idea that this isn't all we get. There were years and years and years of my life Where I thought, okay, this is as good as it gets, and it's not so good, and I actually don't operate that way anymore. That's a radical shift in my thinking, and also a radical shift in my experience of my life lived. And so I'm hopeful. And I'm not I'm a curmudgeon and a bit of a pessimist in many ways. I'm a cranky old fart some days.
You're a curmudgeon in remission, Paul, because I'm looking at you and you're radically different. Every single time I see you, you're more and more different.
Well, I think hopefully I'm more and more myself. That's all. Or more and more of the aspect of me that holds great hope. And I do.
Woohoo! Where can people go, Paul, to find your beautiful work, to find the work from the guides, to find out more?
Well, my website's just my name. It's Paul Selig, PaulSelig.com. And I do online workshops every week, and I do intensives once a month online, and I'm doing live events again. And the links to the books are there, but you can find all the books on, the major online booksellers, whichever one you prefer, they're there. And that's it,
Thank you. 2 last questions. First one for the guides. We're going to get off of this, and depending on when we catch this, we may be tempted to go to the news. I'm putting that in quotes, what I call the negative worthless stimulation. And we may well be smacked in the face. What do we do?
I'm hearing trust God. I mean, that sounds feeble. It's not. They're saying it's not. It's the basis for the entire teaching. Trust God. Trust God that everything you see, that everything that you see now may be reseen, that what you perceive to be final is not final, that what you perceive to be final is not final, that all things new, that all things indeed may be made new, period. So that's the period from now.
Thank you. And then this is going to be the secret sauce question, Paul. What have you done that I know you don't put yourself in the position, certainly the pedestal of the spiritual teacher, but you have gone through a radical change or transformation yourself? What's the secret sauce that you would suggest to others at this time?
I don't know. What I'm hearing from them, which is interesting, is let yourself be known, which is stop thinking of yourself as separate. There, I'm hearing let God, whatever God is to you, let God know you. Stop operating as if you're independent, but that the connection that you have may carry you towards what you need.
Thank you. Last super short question for the guides then. Are we going to be okay?
It's finally yes, not right away, and not right away, and finally yes, and finally yes.
Thank you. And thank you to the guides. This has been beautiful. I don't know why my lighting is dark today, but I think you have brought light to the darkness. Perhaps that was somehow particularly appropriate. But this is, I think, just what we needed to hear today, Paul.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Thank you so much. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get resurrection, and begin knowing who you are in truth and claiming it today. And above and beyond all else, shine bright. Woohoo! What a beautiful interview with Paul Selig and the guides. I can't recommend his books enough. On that note, you can go to automaticwriting.com and learn how to channel with the guides as well. And you go to inspirenationuniversity.com where you can join our School of Mystics and learn how to live, exist, be, see, breathe through the upper room. That's at inspirenationuniversity.com where you can come join us for the School of Mystics and learn how to live in that upper room. If you like this and you want more shows, be sure to click the subscribe button and the bell icon where you'll be notified of upcoming shows, YouTube premieres, live events every Monday night with me. Big thumbs up if you like this. Here's the link to the next amazing video. Love you guys so much and keep on shining bright. Woohoo! Truly, how does it get any better than this? How does it get any better than this? I guess Rue upstairs, baby Hannah and wifey behind me. Kitties all around. Woohoo! Love you guys.